Welcome to this YouTube Live. So, let's be honest. No one warns us about the emotional whiplash of parenting a teenager. One day, we're joking in the car, sharing inside jokes, feeling like we've got this rhythm, this closeness. The next day, we say good morning, and all we get back is a grunt, or worse, silence. And it hits in a way we didn't expect. We tell ourselves, it's just a phase, but something deeper stirs, something has shifted. Today, I want to talk about the unspoken challenges of parenting teens. Not the ones that show up in memes or advice columns, but the ones that live underneath the surface, the quiet ones that make us question if we're doing any of this right. The loneliness, the subtle grief, the exhaustion of trying to hold it all together and still feeling like we're missing something essential. And here's what I want us to start with. This isn't happening because we're failing. It's happening because adolescence doesn't just grow our kids up, it grows us up too. It pushes us into a new version of parenthood that no one prepared us for. So if you feel that mix of love, confusion, and fatigue, take a breath and listen for a minute. No one's broken. We're just in the middle of a transformation no one warned us was coming. So let's talk about this invisible shift. When our kids were small, our role was clear. We knew how to protect, nurture, and teach. Our authority made sense because their dependence was visible. Adolescence rewrites the script, though. One day we realize they don't need us in the same way. And that realization can feel like a small betrayal. We start to miss the little moments, bedtime stories, spontaneous hugs, being the center of their world. And now, even when we try to offer that same love, it lands differently. It's met with a sigh and eye roll, or a door closing halfway through our sentence. The truth is, our teens are supposed to pull away. That's how they become separate people. But knowing that doesn't make it easier. When that distance shows up, most of us react in one of two ways. We either chase harder, trying to reestablish closeness, or we retreat to avoid rejection. Both come from love, and both can make connection harder. When we chase, they feel suffocated. When we retreat, they feel abandoned. And the irony is they probably need both our presence and our space at the same time. That paradox is the heartbeat of adolescence. Parenting teens is a lot like holding a mirror. They reflect not just who they're becoming, but who we are under pressure, how we handle uncertainty, rejection, and love that isn't always received the way we meant it. The invisible shift becomes visible when we realize our job is no longer to manage their world. It's to manage our reactions to the world they're creating. Control used to mean keeping them safe. Safety now means keeping ourselves grounded while they figure themselves out. And most of us were never taught that kind of control. We grew up where authority meant compliance, not regulation. So when our teens push back, it stirs our own histories, our memories of what it felt like to be misunderstood or dismissed. Parenting teens doesn't just ask us to guide another person through transformation. It asks us to face our own. That's what makes it heavy. Not the logistics, not the chaos, but the emotional weight of growth on both sides. So if we've ever wondered, why does this feel so personal? It's because it is. Their growing up pushes against the deepest parts of us that once defined who we were as parents. And living through that, without losing connection, is the real work. If this part feels familiar, if you've noticed that shift from being needed to being resisted, drop a yes in the comments. That moment of recognition matters. It's how we know we're not alone in the shift. Now, there are some hidden emotional costs that parents pay in our work to be better to our teens. At some point, Every one of us asks the same question, maybe not out loud, but in the quiet moments. Am I doing enough? Am I doing it wrong? And that's the first cost of parenting a teenager: self-doubt. We start replaying conversations, dissecting every choice. We scroll social media and compare our behind the scenes to other people's highlight reels. And the culture doesn't help. We're told to be firm but gentle, give them space but stay close, set limits but be flexible. It's impossible. So we doubt ourselves constantly. But self-doubt doesn't mean we're failing. It means we're awake. It means we care enough to keep asking hard questions. And that's not weakness, that's reflection. Most parents who worry they're messing up are actually the ones doing the most work, because they're still showing up, still trying, and that's what our teens need more than perfection: presence. The second hidden cost is exhaustion. Not the kind a nap fixes, the kind that comes from constant vigilance. When our kids were little, we could monitor with our eyes. Now we monitor with intuition. We're reading tone, body language, emotional temperature, constantly scanning for signs that things are okay. It's like living in a house where the lights flicker. We never know when the next surge or blackout will come. That kind of vigilance changes us. It makes us jumpier, shorter, more reactive. We tell ourselves, we're just trying to teach, but really, we're pleading underneath, please meet us halfway. That's how we slide into overfunctioning, doing too much emotional labor for both people in the relationship. We try harder, they resist. We double down, and before long, we're exhausted and resentful. We start mistaking effort for effectiveness. Sometimes the most loving thing we can do is less. Less fixing, less explaining, less rescuing. Not because we've stopped caring, but because we're giving them room to start. When we stop carrying everything, they start feeling their own weight. And that's how they grow resilience, a sense of mastery and of being someone. Now let's talk more about grief, a third unspoken cost, because beneath the exhaustion, there's often grief. Not the kind anyone names. It's the grief of change, the ache that shows up when we stumble across an old photo or when we pass their empty room and feel something catch in our throat. We miss the simplicity. We miss knowing who we were in their life. Even if we love who they're becoming, we still feel the loss of who they were. But society tells us to move on quickly, to let go, to celebrate independence. So we suppress it. We tell ourselves, this is good. This is what's supposed to happen. But the ache doesn't vanish. It just hides. And when it hides long enough, it starts leaking out as frustration. After everything I've done, this is how you treat me? Parents aren't wrong to feel it. We've given so much of ourselves. But our teens can't validate our sacrifices yet. They don't have the emotional bandwidth for that. The validation has to come from within, from knowing that love is meant to grow them, not bind them to gratitude. Their distance isn't rejection. It's the beginning of a new form of love, one that asks us to see them differently and to love them for who they're becoming, not who they've been. That's the hardest part of this stage, and maybe the most sacred. If that lands, if you've ever felt the ache of missing who your teen used to be, drop "me too" in the chat. It's okay to name that loss. It's what makes room for the next version of connection. Here's the paradox of adolescence. We have less control than ever, but more influence than we realize. That tension between control and influence is where almost every parent I've ever worked with gets stuck. And it makes sense because everything about our parenting instincts tells us That influence should come from control, that if we lose control, we lose our ability to make an impact. Here's the thing. Adolescence rewrites that logic completely. Our teens don't stop listening because they're defiant by nature. They stop listening because control is no longer the language they understand. They're entering a developmental stage where what once felt like safety, rules, reminders, and structure can now feel like intrusion, and yet they still need those boundaries, even when they fight against them. They just need them delivered in a different language, one grounded in respect, steadiness, and trust. That's the paradox. They push against us not because they want us gone, but because they're trying to find out where they begin. And if we can hold steady in that space, if we can survive being misunderstood without retaliating, we become the one thing they can still rely on, a steady reference point in a world that feels unpredictable. But we are human, right? Let's be honest. Control feels good. It gives us the illusion of safety. We can look at a rule or a consequence and think, see, I'm doing something. I'm keeping them on track. But what if control is often a disguise for our anxiety? We want guarantees. We want to know that if we do A, we'll get B. That if we parent right, they'll make good choices, stay safe, and turn out okay. But control was always a short-term solution to a long-term process. Influence, on the other hand, is relational. It's messy. It's built in real time through moments that don't always look like progress. It asks us to tolerate uncertainty, to stay steady, even when we're not sure we're getting through. Control says, I'll feel calm when you change. Influence says, I'll stay calm so this doesn't get worse. That's a completely different posture and is much harder because it means choosing steadiness without reassurance. Because influence is built in the moments we don't see. Think about it. When do the lessons we try to teach actually take root? Not in the middle of the argument, not right after the consequence. They land later, quietly, when our teen is alone or reflecting or realizing that something we said made more sense than they wanted to admit at the time. That's what makes influence different from control. Control works fast and fades quickly. Influence is slow, invisible, but lasting. It's in the memory of how we handled disappointment without shaming them. It's in the way we stayed firm without humiliating them. It's in the tone of our voice when we said, I still love you, but this isn't okay. Those moments become emotional reference points. They teach by example, not demand. Influence is built on consistency, not compliance, and it often looks like nothing is happening until something does. So here's the thing, there are times when control backfires. And here's what happens when we lean too heavily on control. We accidentally communicate, I don't trust you. And when our teen hears that enough, they internalize a painful message. If you don't trust me, maybe I can't trust myself. And that's where helplessness begins. That's where shame grows. Over time, they stop bringing us their problems because they already know the script. They know we'll lecture or fix or worry out loud in ways that make them feel incapable. And so they start turning to peers, the internet, or silence, not because they don't love us, but because it feels safer. That's what chronic control does. It makes honesty feel risky. Influence isn't about making our teen calm down. It's about refusing to make their chaos worse. It's the art of staying in the room emotionally and physically without pouring fuel on the fire. When things get heated, our first instinct is to manage, to talk, to explain, to fix, to reason. Often, what they need most is space that isn't reactive, because what's happening inside them is already chaotic. They don't need our anxiety echoing it back. Our steadiness doesn't make their chaos disappear, but it keeps it contained. It turns a potential explosion into a moment that can pass. We're not responsible for their calm. We're responsible for not adding more noise to an already loud experience. That's where influence lives, in the choice to not contribute more chaos when things already feel unstable. No, we can't control their reactions, but we can decide whether we amplify them or anchor them, and that's what makes the difference between escalation and understanding. From a developmental lens, the adolescent brain is wired for intensity. Their emotional system is running at full volume, while the part of their brain that organizes and regulates emotion is still developing. That's why our steadiness matters. Not because they borrow our calm, but because we show them that intensity doesn't have to become catastrophe. When we meet volatility with volatility, we make their world louder. When we meet volatility with steadiness, we keep the world from spinning faster. Our job is never to erase their chaos. It's to make sure we're not multiplying it. That's what presence does. It doesn't soothe in some sentimental way. It stabilizes reality. And over time, that steadiness teaches something essential: that conflict and emotion can exist without destroying connection, that what eventually becomes their own regulation, not imitation of our calm, but internalization of what safety feels like when emotions are big. But let's be real, this is challenging work. There's always that moment when our teen looks us straight in the eye and says, "You can't make me." And we feel it like a punch, because they're right, we can't. And that helplessness can send us into panic or into wisdom. If we panic, we reach for control. If we breathe, we can reach for clarity. We can say, "You're right, I can't make you, but I'm clear about what I will do." That's the shift from control to boundary. It's calm, it's confident, it's grounded. When we say, "You can't talk to me like that," we're enforcing control. When we say, "I don't continue conversations when I'm being yelled at and I'm stepping away for now," we're holding a boundary. See the difference? One demands submission. The other models self-respect, and that's the paradox again. Less control, more influence. Because now we're not competing with their autonomy. We're demonstrating to them how we use ours. If something in this section hit home, maybe that part about not adding chaos or realizing influence is slow but steady, type presence in the comments. That one word really captures what this whole stage of parenting is about. So when we think about that paradox, the one where control fades but influence deepens, it's not a problem to solve. It's an invitation to grow. It asks us to move from authority to authenticity, from pressure to presence, from managing outcomes to modeling steadiness. That's the work that no one really talks about, but it's the work that grounds everything. And so when we talk about the steps ahead, it starts with clarity. Clarity is the antidote to chaos. It's knowing what's ours to carry, what's theirs. We're responsible for providing structure, safety, and direction. We're not responsible for managing how they feel about those things. We can set a rule with empathy and still have them dislike it. We can validate their frustration and still hold our line. That's not inconsistency. That's integrity. Boundaries don't need agreement. They need steadiness. And steadiness gives our teens the structure their emotions can bounce off of safely. When we start to confuse clarity with control, we end up micromanaging feelings instead of guiding behavior. Clarity brings us back to what's actually within reach. And sometimes clarity isn't about fixing anything at all. Sometimes clarity is simply being able to name what's happening for what it is, chaotic. To say, this feels disorganized, or this moment is messy, without rushing to make it neat. Because naming chaos is a form of containment. It acknowledges reality instead of fighting it. And the moment we can call something by its true name, we stop being consumed by it. And that's a kind of authority too. The kind that doesn't control the storm, but it steadies the ship. I can't make you feel grateful, but I can decide how I respond when I feel taken for granted. I can't make you care about school, but I can decide what I'm willing to invest in if effort isn't there. That's what grounded authority sounds like. It's calm, not cold, firm, not rigid. It doesn't argue, it just stands. And that steadiness, more than any lecture, teaches responsibility. Because when our limits are clear, our love feels safer. Our teens learn that love and limits can coexist, and that's how trust grows again. Number 2, validate before we correct. When things get tense, our instinct is to fix. We want to help them see reason. We want to close the gap and get back to peace. But if we skip over validation, they stop hearing us. Correction without validation feels like criticism, and criticism shuts down curiosity, the very thing we need from them if we want them to grow. Validation doesn't mean agreeing with their perspective. It means acknowledging it. It's saying, I see what you're feeling, not, you're right. And when we validate, we don't just calm them, we calm ourselves. We remember that emotions aren't the enemy, they're information. Sometimes validation is as simple as saying, yeah, I can see why that feels unfair. Or, that makes sense, you worked hard and it didn't go how you wanted. It doesn't take much, but it shifts the energy instantly from opposition to possibility. When we validate before correcting, we make space for accountability that doesn't humiliate. That's the difference between influence and compliance again. Compliance is quick but shallow. Influence takes time, but it lasts. And every time we start with understanding, we make influence possible. Number 3, repair, not react. We're going to get it wrong sometimes. We are going to overreact, say too much, shut down too fast. It's inevitable. But the story doesn't end there. What matters most is what happens next. Repair isn't about pretending the rupture didn't happen. It's about returning to the connection with humility and steadiness. It sounds like, that didn't go the way I wanted. I'm sorry for my part. Repair doesn't mean we excuse the behavior or collapse into guilt. It means we model what accountability looks like. We show it's possible to take responsibility without losing dignity. And when we do that, our teens learn that mistakes don't end connection, they deepen it. Because when love survives truth, safety grows. And the beauty of repair is that it doesn't depend on their response. They don't have to accept it. Our willingness to reach out is what matters most. It says, this relationship is way bigger than this moment. And that's the heartbeat of real connection. Number 4, redefine success. Success in parenting teens has nothing to do with constant harmony. It's about resilience, ours and theirs. It's not about raising a teen who never falters. It's about raising one who knows they can get up after falling and come home. It's not about them always agreeing. It's about them learning that disagreement doesn't end love. And it's not about control. It's about connection that can survive conflict. That's the long game. That's our legacy. When we redefine success, we stop measuring ourselves by how calm or compliant our teen is. We start measuring by how clear and grounded we remain when things get messy, how honest our teens can be with us. That shift changes everything. It takes us from fear-based parenting to emotional leadership. We start to see our role isn't to keep them from struggling, it's to help them struggle well, to make sure that when life gets hard, they still know where home is. We're not the hero of their story. We're the steady ground beneath it. And that's a much more powerful role. Number 5, the practice of staying regulated. Sometimes the hardest part of parenting teens isn't what happens outside. It's what happens inside of us. When we're triggered by their tone or their defiance, it's rarely just about that moment. It's touching something old, our own experiences of being unseen or dismissed. So much of staying regulated is about recognizing those echoes, the old beliefs that whisper in us, if they're angry, I failed, or if they're distant, I'm losing them. But regulation doesn't mean suppression. It means awareness. It's taking that breath before we speak. It's choosing to pause instead of pounce. It's remembering this isn't an emergency. This is adolescence. That sentence alone, this is adolescence, can change the entire nervous system of a moment because it reminds us the chaos is developmental, not personal. They're not attacking us. They're experimenting with independence. And when we can see it that way, we respond from wisdom instead of fear. Number 6, emotional stamina. We talk a lot about emotion regulation, but what we often need more of is emotional stamina. The ability to tolerate tension without rushing to resolve it. That's what our teens need to see most from us, that love can coexist with frustration, that connection doesn't vanish when things are hard. Stamina is what allows us to stay in hard moments long enough to repair. Without it, we either overreact or withdraw. When we build stamina, we stay grounded in our values, even when the emotional weather gets stormy. That's how our teen learned to do the same. Number 7, the power of ordinary moments. Here's something that's easy to overlook. Influence isn't built in the deep conversations. It's built in the ordinary ones. It's built in the car rides, the shared meals, the moments where we're not talking about anything heavy. Those are the spaces where safety accumulates quietly. When connection is strong in the ordinary, it can withstand the extraordinary. We don't have to orchestrate the perfect talks. We just have to show up as real people, curious, imperfect, available. That's what keeps the bridge between us open. Number 8, staying curious. When we're tired or frustrated, curiosity is the first thing to go. But curiosity is what turns power struggles into possibilities. Instead of asking, what's wrong with them? We can ask, what might be going on for them right now? Instead of, why are they doing this to me? We can ask, what are they trying to figure out? Curiosity slows down judgment. It invites empathy without surrendering boundaries. It keeps us in the role of learner, not controller. And that's what keeps connection alive. Curiosity is influence in disguise. So here are some closing reflections. Parenting a teenager is both brutal and beautiful. It breaks us open and remakes us at the same time. It asks us to grow right alongside them, to expand our capacity for discomfort, for patience, for love that doesn't always feel rewarding in the moment. It's okay that it feels hard. It's okay that some days we wonder if we're making any difference at all. Because the truth is we are. Every time we choose to pause instead of explode, listen instead of lecture, repair instead of retreat, we are showing that love can survive the storm. We are teaching our teens that conflict doesn't erase connection, it reveals it. That honesty doesn't have to end a relationship, it can strengthen it. And that's what makes this season so sacred. Not because it's easy, but because it's real and so critical. When we can start to see adolescence not as something to survive, but as something to join, as a shared transformation, everything changes. We stop seeing disrespect as defiance and start seeing it as dysregulation. We stop seeing distance as rejection and start seeing it as experimentation. We stop seeing failure as danger and start seeing it as development. That shift from fear to understanding is what restores our influence. We begin to notice that our teens aren't looking for perfection. They're looking for consistency. They want to know if we can handle the whole truth of who they are, not just the parts that are easy to love. And when we are able to, when we stay steady without shutting down, they start trusting that connection can hold more than comfort. And that's when real communication begins again. So if you're in a season right now where things feel messy, where every conversation feels like walking through fog, please hear me when I say this. You are not failing, you're evolving. And the fog is part of the terrain. It means you're walking through uncharted territory with someone who's also trying to find their way. You don't need a perfect map. You just need a place to stand. And that place, it isn't control or certainty, it's clarity. Clarity about what matters most to us and clarity about what we're feeling in the middle of all of this. Because when we can name what we feel, we stop being ruled by it. And when we can remember what matters, we stop reacting out of fear and start responding from truth. That's the ground we parent from. Not perfection, not performance, but presence. And that place, that clarity, that steadiness, that self-respect is what your teen needs most from you. Because eventually, they'll borrow that stance. Not imitating your calm, not imitating your control, but your steadiness. They'll remember that when things got chaotic, you didn't make them worse. You didn't pile on. You didn't withdraw. You stayed. And that memory will become part of their foundation for how to handle life when it gets hard. That's how we pass strength on, not by controlling outcomes, but by embodying the qualities we hope will live in them long after they've left us. And so, take a moment. If you felt something shift in you during this live, that moment of recognition, that little breath of relief, that sense of, oh, this is what's been happening, please notice it. Notice what it feels like. Where in your body do you feel it? Because that's what validation feels like. It's what happens when your experience is met without judgment, without trying to fix it, and someone simply says, yeah, that makes sense. That's the same experience your teen is aching for. Not solutions first, but understanding. When we validate them the way I've tried to validate you today, we give them what you might have just felt, permission to exhale. That's where change starts, in the space where we stop fighting to be right and start being real. If this conversation spoke to you, if you felt seen or a little less alone, I'd love to help you find clarity that fits your specific situation. You can book a free 30-minute consult with me at the link in the description. We'll look together at what's happening in your relationship with your teen and find the next steps that make sense for you. No pressure, no judgment. Just a grounded, practical conversation about how to move from confusion to clarity. And if this live resonated, please hit like and subscribe. It helps more parents find these conversations. And man, there are a lot of us who need this. Thank you for spending this time with me.